So I've been wanting to record and tell you about my eclipse experience because, that was like a few weeks ago and I'm barely like getting to recovered enough to actually feel like I can talk about it. And so what was going on is that I was doing a lot of preparation for it before the eclipse. So I pretty much felt like something really big was going to be happening, like some energy shifts were occurring that I felt were going to impact a lot of people. And I felt like I needed to do some grid work. I needed to clear the grids so that the incoming energy on the planet wouldn't just amplify all of the bad things and, override the good things. Like, I felt like the clearing work that I needed to do was going to help to clear out of the grids, out of people. So I'm just going to read you guys this blog post that I wrote just before the eclipse. It was kind of like a summary of what was going on. I think I wrote a couple, but I don't think everybody got to read them, so hopefully that's helpful to you. Very few know what's going on, and most are not going to tell you because the power is in stealth, and secrets help to manipulate the masses, and we all know what actually happens to the truth speakers in the world. I will tell you some things though, because that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to help others to see the truth and to find their role as conscious souls within larger frames of existence. Here's some things to consider and run through your own personal truth meter if it serves to broaden your perspective or activate you towards alignment. I've been clearing the planetary grids and stargates at the galactic and universal levels, as well as the personal for the collective, and I've been clearing programs, miasma, and all kinds of entities. I've been including my physical body, of course, because it's all connected as we are the universe. And I feel this massive shift. I've been calling in God and the guardians to ground in through like the 14th, 13th, 15th layers, and from like 12D to the first dimension is what I was clearing. And I was doing all of the dimensions in between. Within this universe, and I was intending this healing to be for myself, for my lineage, and for everyone that I had the capacity and authority to represent for such a healing. And so I had very interesting experiences, including literally seeing like the grids being rebuilt. Like I literally had, like I would wake up sometimes when I was like half asleep, and I would just see the grids like actually like weaving together as a light like around the planet, and it was so beautiful. So I saw that there was a lot of like, there was different layers. So there was like the vertical grids, like the ley lines going up the X20 line. And then there was like the horizontal ones that go around the planet like this. And the horizontal ones were like a thinner band of rainbow colors. And those like extend outwards. And so they were just like radiating out and all around the planet. And then there was also the ones that were going up like vertically. And I just felt like what I was doing was working. And I even looked at the astrology placements of certain things. And they had changed. Like the degrees of things had changed. And so I kind of felt like I had been transporting myself to like a new timeline just by doing so much grid work, because even when I was doing the grid work and I was intending for the healing to occur, like I meant for it to happen. Even like when I would go to the planetary level, meaning like when I would talk about removing stuff out of the grids from our planet, because maybe I should back up a little bit. Okay. So like there's everybody knows about chakras. So chakras are happening on your body. So there's different ways to like visualize the energy centers around your body and how energy functions and works all the way around you. So you could look at like the 8 chakra system that could just go straight up and down your spine, and then you could look at like the 12 tree grid. So there's a 12 tree grid, and I'm pretty sure that I posted a video where I show you exactly like what that one looks like, but there's a bunch of different ones online if you want to go look yourself. So that's kind of, I sort of like merged both systems, even though the 12 tree grid is more complete. And so we have this grid system around our body, which is just like how the energy centers, and you have like way more chakras too, but these are like main ways that you can visualize how the energy centers are running through your body. And those correspond to the way that the energy is running through the earth. And the earth has its own like electromagnetic field. And so that field also corresponds to the pattern that is in our solar system. And that pattern also corresponds as part of the universal system. And so we're all connected, like the macro to the micro. And when you start to clear yourself, I started doing this at the personal level. And so when I would clear a program from my own personal X20 lines, which are like the vertical layer lines running up and down my body, I think I told you guys how I was using my fingers to like really clear them and unite them. And I have a video on how you could do that yourself. So I was clearing the grids and like the X20 lines within my own system. And as I was clearing them within my own system, I would just like trace where the pattern would stop, like where were the energy blockages within myself. And I would just trace that all along because I'm intuitive and I could just feel that, but so are you. Maybe you're just not attuned yet, or maybe you are. So I would just trace that within my own body. And so I got used to, because my guides had me do this. I hadn't done this before. I just felt very, very guided to do this at this time, because like I said, I felt like I was sort of like in a critical time frame for myself and for the planet, because I felt like something really huge was going to happen, like the stargates were going to open. And I just felt like I needed to clear the negative energy there so that it wouldn't be able to walk through, or if there was negative energy, it would be greatly lessened by the clearing work, or at least that it wouldn't affect certain people, especially myself or people that I love and care about. And so when I was doing the clearings, I got really used to understanding how my body works and how the energy feels running through my body when it's clear and when it's blocked. So each of these 12 energy centers along your body corresponds to dimension. So you would go from like 1D to 12D. And I have a whole different video on it, so you can go look at that. This is more like for the podcast. So, and some of you are not going to be watching the video, you're just going to watch the actual audio. So I would go to like 1D and then clear stuff there, like programs and implants and just like dark reversals of energy. And after I was done clearing those specific programs from myself, from where I felt the energy blockages within my body, then I would move onto the planetary grids. And so there's different grid lines along the earth as well. You can look at stargates, which are like bigger concentrations of energy along those points on the planet, or you can look at actual different grids and where people say that the chakras of the earth are. I like to focus on the stargates because I feel very connected to them personally. Like I always have. I've always felt like this multi-dimensional time shift jumper person, which I know I am. But so I was focusing on that. I felt like I needed to do this with a group of people, but I did not find the right people to do it. There was a few people that I invited to meditate with me, but we couldn't meet up at the same time, and it just didn't exactly work out the way that I wanted. And ideally what I wanted was to have like 12 people. Like I wanted to have at least 12 people. So we would have ideally like 6 females, 6 males, and each could represent a point on the 12 tree grid and a point on the planet. And I wanted us all to like run rainbow frequency throughout our own bodies, clearing ourselves and our entire genetic lineage, as well as clearing the planet. And because when you do this with more people, like the energy builds and it clears a lot more than when you're just doing it yourself. Because if you're one person, obviously you can run less energy through your actual physical system. And so I would clear a specific program from myself, and then I would move on to the planetary body and I would request. And so when I say clear, like I obviously have a method of praying that I also outlined in that video on YouTube. And so I would pray to clear that, obviously with God, and I intended for everything to be as God would have it be. And I also intended for it to be where I have the authority to represent those grids, those systems, those energies. And you know, I wasn't trying to override anything that I wasn't supposed to do. I have always given my guides permission to just like stop things when I'm going too far. And so I just listen to that and I trust myself. And so I would just go on and I would clear stuff at the different planetary levels. And sometimes, and I would also use my fingers like I showed you. So I connected, we are already connected, but we have to like consciously do it sometimes. And so I connected my own field to the earth field so that I could feel, and I already do, like when I was a kid, I could feel the planetary's rotation and I could feel like the tectonic shifts along the planets. I've always like felt this. And so I connected my body to the planetary field. And I would just, like when I was asking for the clearings to occur, I would feel it within my own meridian system and within my own energy in my body. And I would run the energy from God's source, from the 12th dimension, which would represent like our Christos avatar, God blueprint self. So like the one that is incorruptible, the aspect of ourself that is very close to God, just, you know, past, I mean, there's a whole structure to the universe that I'm adhering to and following, but we'll just say that it's like, I was following the divine blueprint of God, and so that's where I was drawing the energy from. And I was asking this higher self aspect guide of me and the whole planet, really, and the star beings who are for truth, the warriors of light, and who are for the freedom and sovereignty of all of the planets, to help me with this. And I mean, I have a whole prayer method. I invited other people to do it, and it's on my YouTube if you want to go into it yourself, because you can, the way that I recorded it for other people is that I just did it at the personal level, and then I give you the information if you want to do it at the planetary, at the solar system, and at the galactic universal levels, which you can do on your own, because it does take a really long time. Like this took me probably like 2-ish weeks of almost non-stop meditating. So I would basically just do like the necessity, which is like I would go to work, take my son to school, I would just do whatever I needed to do, and then I would get right back to meditating. Because the thing is that like when your soul agrees to do something for the planet or for the earth, like you are impulsed, you're riding that wave, and you will be impulsed to do it and to complete it. And so it will push you until you complete it and you're done. And sometimes that can be hard on the human. So sometimes you also have to like work with your own guidance system, because like for me, I like to finish stuff. Like if I start something, I really, really want to finish it. And sometimes, because I do tend to have like kind of like a all over the place type of energy, like very ADHD, because my attention span is like tapped into a million different places at once. So I feel all the connections, and I want to convey those connections to you so that you can also feel how connected we all are. And so I was trying, sometimes like I'll start cleaning the fridge and I'm like, oh my God, I better, you know, finish this before I get bored of cleaning the fridge because I just want it done. And like, so I would get bored of things like in the middle of doing them. And so with this, I was like, I have to finish this. Like I cannot do anything else or start any other projects until I finish it. So I did it like nonstop almost for like 2 weeks. And I like barely left my house. And so I was going around clearing like my own personal body, and then jump to the planet, jump to the galactic, jump to the universal levels at layers like 11D to the first dimension. And obviously like I have experience from other lifetimes of doing this. I mean, I don't feel like I need to caution people. I feel like you either feel and you know that you can do it, or you feel like you shouldn't do it. And if you feel like you shouldn't do it, then just don't do it, and just ask for the clearing to be done on your own personal body and your own personal energetic field. So that's what I did like leading up to the eclipse, and I'll continue reading a little bit because it kind of like follows a structure. So I had really interesting experiences, including literally seeing the grids being rebuilt, and also some of the energetic. Okay, so there were some attacks that made me almost not continue and not post. And so what happens is that like basically with the whole clearing thing, it's like imagine that somebody has stolen land, right? And then you go in there and you're like, hey, that's not your land. You need to leave and let the rightful owners come back and take this, right? So those people, those beings are going to fight you. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're happy to leave. Sometimes they want to move on. Sometimes they've been there for like millions of years and they're just like, let me out of here. And so in those cases, I would just, you know, like help them to move on. I would just like, it's pretty easy. I don't personally negotiate contracts with beings. I'm just like, this is what you have to do. These are your options. Like, go back to God source, or let's renegotiate. Let's call in the appropriate astral guide for you. And so we'll call that appropriate guide in, and then it would just be called in and help the being to transition. But it could not stay where it was. If it was in the way, or if it was upholding a program that was going against God's original divine blueprint, which I didn't even really try to interpret. But generally, if you have a program that is upholding something like chaos, disorder, something that is like a very negative polarity of a theme that we're all experiencing, like prejudice or hatred, like obviously those are not like God's preferences, so those can be cleared. So I would ask about those, and I had a lot of interesting experiences. Like, I don't remember exactly what the energetic attacks were. I feel like the attacks might have continued, or my system was just overrun with all of the work that I was doing and all of the energy, because when I would go to sleep, I would not really be sleeping. Like, I would just like continue the work, and I could feel it like continue, and it's just like you make the commands from your highest self, from your highest aspect, and when you do this, your guides may or may not do it. You can request it and your intention will be noted. But if your higher self thinks that it's too much for you, then obviously they're going to space out the actual timing of when things occur for you. And so you don't have to be afraid of the work. That's just like how it is. And you'll be safe, but obviously follow your own guidance and intuition. So when I was doing this, I got really, really exhausted, like really tired. Like I just had to sleep like a lot. Pretty much my free time was meditating and sleeping for the whole time, like 2 weeks after the eclipse, and even afterwards. Like, I mean, it's 2 weeks later now, probably. I don't know what, it's like April 20th, and the eclipse was April 8th, and I have still needed a lot of sleep. I've been recovering, and I'm still meditating on different things, working with different programs and learning a lot, but it does take a lot of work to actually like integrate it, because if you think about it, you have to have enough energy to actually like break into the system, break into the cells. Like, have you ever done one of those detox programs where you take like MSM powder and then it goes into your cell and it like bursts open the cell wall? Well, it's like now you have to actually flush out the toxins, right? So hopefully you have something to absorb the negative energy and pull it out of your body without wreaking havoc all over everything else. And that takes energy, it takes time, it takes, like, you have to rest and allow your body to recover. And so a lot of times, like, even when you take different courses and programs, it's like you have to allow your body, like, you know that you're going to be integrating things for a while, and it could be anywhere. It just depends on your own guidance system, what your body's able to handle, what you personally are dealing with in your life right now. But for me, I'm a very much like, let's do it now, because I want things done now, and I'm very impatient. So I was like, let's do it as quickly as possible, and I'll try to handle as much as I possibly can. And so sometimes I feel like I go a little bit too far, and then my life ends up a little bit chaotic, but that's okay, because I feel like the actual after effects are really worth it, which is that I feel like immediately after, I mean, I probably have some other programming stuff right now, but so that is still left to clear because I'm still doing so much. But immediately, no, maybe like a few days afterwards, I felt the most free that I had ever felt in my entire life. I felt like this huge net of like this webbing had been lifted from my soul, from my being. Whereas like before, I felt like I was carrying like almost like the whole weight of the entire world on my shoulders. And then after I did all those clearings, it was like I was free. I felt like all this space open up, like in front of me, behind me, like to the sides. And I felt so good. It felt like you know how when you hear people talking about how they've done something that's like really hard, and they're like, I wouldn't take $1 million for it, and I wouldn't trade for anything. Like, that's kind of how I felt. It's like, can you really put a price on your freedom, on actually feeling completely free of certain programs? And so here's where you have a little bit of like a push-pull kind of thing going on, because even though you might clear things from your own personal field, the grids have been infiltrated by a lot of different negative entities. Okay, so there's been a lot of fighting over this planet, as I'm sure you've heard by like lots of other spiritual teachers talk about these things, and all the different entities have wanted to come to Earth and, you know, enslave humanity for various purposes. And I'm not going to get into too many details of that, but they've basically placed a lot of reversal currents of energy into the planet and into the field so that they could unhook our own DNA strand, so that we wouldn't have access to our higher selves, so that they could control us. Because the more aware that a being becomes, the less easy they are to control, the less easy they are to manipulate. So if you remember who you truly are, of course you're not going to like let all these people come in and take all your rights away. You're going to fight to keep your freedoms. And so they don't want people to be aware of that. They want people to just be like sick, working for survival, constantly busy, constantly chasing things that they will never catch, like satisfaction from external sources, or like constantly chasing pleasure that is just going to be fleeting because your system is so overwhelmed by like a dopamine rush that it doesn't even do anything good for you anymore. So they're always going to be doing stuff like that, and that's how they want people to be. It's actually like a frequency band leash. So all of humanity, most of humanity, is leashed up by those frequencies of like survival. So it's like either they're getting to you with like the survival thing, or with like the sexual money aspect, or with power. And that's like if you really think about it, that's where most people are at. It's like very few people really dive into their hearts and feel love fully, or can even have a good understanding of unconditional love. Like or sometimes you can for a little bit, but then you go right back into those three. And I'm not saying that they're bad. They're all aspects of you and they should all be explored. But to be stuck there for like thousands, millions of years is not the way that we were originally designed. We were originally designed to come and flow into the system for an experience and then to flow back out. It's like it's supposed to be like that breath of God coming into the universe, to flow through everything that has been created, animate it, give it life, to feel itself and its connection to all of the different points of existence within this field, within this realm, and then to instantly like come back. And we are doing that like every moment, but we're not meant to be stuck here looping in constant reincarnation without being able to get out or to advance to a different dimensional layer. Because as we are right now, most humans are only aware of like maybe 3 or 4 layers of their own dimensional experience. And so ideally you would constantly be aware of being here embodied on Earth, but at the same time you'd have connection with your other higher self. So like you would be aware of what your 12D self is doing, or your 10D self, or your 6D self, wherever it is in the galaxy, in another planet, on this planet, on a different timeline. Like you would be aware of that, and it would vastly enhance your experience here, because you'd be able to appreciate 3D so much more. It's kind of like, have you ever just been overwhelmed by like a trip somewhere else and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm just so glad to be home in 3D, where everything is like kind of boring and just the way it is. It's kind of like that. Like it gives you context. And so there's been all kinds, like everybody knows about different layers of corruption within the government and all kinds of different systems. But what not everyone agrees on, even if they are into like different conspiracy theories and stuff, is the fact that there are aspects of, we'll say like government culture, whether you want to believe it or not, they have these weird bonding experiences where they will like literally like go and like sacrifice certain people over specific points on the planet, because they're harvesting the energy of those beings, and they're feeding it to demonic forces that they summon, that come up to like through those dimensional layers and those portals into the earth, so that those beings will then give them power to manipulate and to run the money grids, to run like all kinds of different like corruption schemes on the planet. And so there's various groups of different we'll say like ET beings and different kinds of beings that have been controlling different aspects of the government. And you know, like people who just want to do anything to win, like they'll just try whatever. So just because we're not living at a time where people can be like executed at like a guillotine, or you know, you can't like go around cutting people's heads off, like they've done that for so long. We just have different weapons now, and we're also quite desensitized to lots of different kinds of violence through like video games and movies and all of that. But this is still going on around the world and at different layers. And I mean violence is kind of like a different topic, but I'm just saying like there's dark grids that are being run that help to keep people at specific dimensional bandwidths. And so these are the things that uphold those programs that we want to clear out of the grids. Because when you have planetary alignments, like when you have Jupiter come in or when you have the moon come in, like they amplify specific energies and specific frequencies, and they're also kind of like transmitters of specific frequencies and energy that will impact everyone on the planet depending on how those people and how those beings are coded. So some beings are coded with physical implants, etheric implants, different kinds of implants. Some people are coded and tagged by different ET races, like everyone who's had those like ET abduction experiences, or different kinds of like even astral realm abductions or whatever. Like it can also be in your DNA, like from your ancestors from back in the day when they used to just like take people, or even now, like there's so much. So anyways, people are tagged with different things. And so depending on how you're tagged and how you're coded, either through your DNA or etheric implants, or you've been like part of the military and they, you know, like they just put so much into your body that you're not even aware of, you're going to be impulsed. And even now with like everything that's going on, like everything that they're spraying into the skies, like there is nanotech and all of this stuff that is meant to suppress certain aspects of humanity, certain aspects of your brain. It's meant to compress and you know, inhibit certain parts of your immunity. It's supposed to trigger specific things within your body. And so and it's not all immediate. Like these things, they don't want it to be immediate. It is going to take some time, and because that way it looks more natural. Okay, so all of these, like if you think of anything that you could have probably came up with in regards to any sort of conspiracy theory or any sort of plan, okay, so they have had groups of elite geniuses and people working for them for like thousands of years. And not only that, but back in the day it was just not I mean, even now, like look at the media. Like it's very obvious that all of these celebrities are worshiping, like they're basically Satanists. Like you can feel it. If you are a sensitive person, if you tune into the radio and like the different frequencies, like I can tell that there has been a woman, or sometimes, and this is really sad, like I can tell who has been sacrificed, like what type of life force was sacrificed that night, or is helping this particular celebrity to have that charisma, to have that extra like sparkliness, because there has been something that they have been siphoning, that they've been sucking life force out of. And again, this is not a natural system. Like we were not created to be that way. And that could be a whole different podcast in itself, where like it's been explained by lots of teachers like Lisa Renee or Ashayana Dean, or lots and lots of different teachers, which I actually just kind of started studying Ashayana Dean. I had heard about her before. I was more into Lisa Renee because like I said, I just go with my intuition, and I try not to tap into other people's stuff, because nobody is really, I mean, very, very few people are totally immune from corruption. And so I want to be very aware of what is coming in from my guidance system and what is coming in from someone else. And I want to see where they match up, because I feel like where there's alignment, then there's more truth and more weight to that if we're both getting the same or similar things, which I have found a very huge correlation between all of our works. So I do find that that's very interesting. So anyway, so that's why I wanted to clear the grids, because I felt like there's just going to be something huge that was happening. And a lot of people don't know like what actually is going on in the world, because they're so distracted, or they just don't want to know, or they don't want to think about it, or it's not relevant because it's not making them money or whatever. But for me, like I'm like a really sensitive person, so I will feel it. And I feel like part of my coding, like I feel like I've been on this planet for a very long time, and like this universe even, and I feel like it's my duty to be involved in these things. And I've been occupied with a lot of different things that have prevented me from taking a more active role, and so I'm trying to like really fully step into that now. And so I feel like that's another reason why I don't really ask a lot of other healers or people for input, because it's only when I really, really need help and I can't find a solution myself that I might reach out to someone else, or when I really, really need it to be coming from another human rather than like in spirit form, because I don't find that many people that know, that can perceive as much as I can. And there are a few people, but then they don't want to talk to me, or like they're just like, I don't know, maybe they sense something else going on. But anyways, so yeah, I just pretty much felt like I was in a precarious situation because of the planetary alignments, because of my own coding, because of my own personal soul mission. And I really felt impulsed to clear everything. And I did whatever I could during those 2-ish weeks when it really hit me that this had to be done. And so I was kind of like, you know, talking to entities from all over. I'm reading again. And let's see. Okay. So there's different beings that I encountered. So I offered love and unconditional forgiveness where I was allowed to, and I prayed for the entities to reweave their God spark and connection to source. Where I could, I sent the beings to a peaceful timeline, which is what all of the layers of the earth are doing right now as she purges. The beings from many ages of existence that have been trapped inside her layers are waking as the timelines are converging, as worlds are converging, as the planetary alignments are occurring. It's opening up stargates within, like the alignments are not just like random alignments, like they're coming together to form, like if you understood sacred geometry and the way that that vacuums are created, like you would understand that when alignments occur, it creates, like nothing is random. Even your breathing, even like respiration is not random. You have a natural pull of electromagnetic energy and frequency that gets sucked into your body. Okay, so depending on the affinity that you have within your own system, that's how much oxygen you're going to receive, right? So if you have the right planetary alignments with the right types of electromagnetic fields, it's going to create a vacuum. It's going to open up portals. It's going to open up different layers along the planetary grids. It's going to activate different things within the planet. And so I just felt that there's a lot of different beings who had been preparing for this, like negative forces. Like I felt like there was going to be a lot of sacrifices. There are a lot of sacrifices that occur during eclipses, during Halloweens, during different planetary alignments, because it's just a powerful time to where they say that the veils are thin, but it's just a powerful time where there's like extra charged energy. And so people who are interested in taking advantage of that will do rituals, will do like spell work, will do grid work, will do all kinds of things like sacrifices. And I wanted to take advantage of that and to try to counteract some of the negativity that was going to be happening in the world by doing all the clearing work. And sometimes when I would do it, I had to interact with the beings that were there, and I didn't get any like really bad beings, I would say. Yeah, I don't feel like I usually get things that I can't handle. It's very, very rare. It's usually, if it happens to be something that like I feel really afraid of, it's usually been because I was like sleeping, and so they caught me off guard and I wasn't even like really prepared for it. But when I go in and I meditate with these things, it's usually like especially, this was kind of interesting when I went to 1D and I was clearing out a few different things. It looked to me like there's like, so I was imagining the 12D, the first dimensional, so the 12 tree grid around my body. Then I went to 1D, and at 1D I went to that sphere, which would be like the first sphere. And you can look at the diagram. I'll probably have another link so that you can look if you're not familiar with it. So I went to it, and then it kind of looked, so I felt like I was being prevented from actually landing on 1D. And I've always had this weird feeling about being grounded. So I feel like if you're coming from like a higher density level, sometimes it can be really hard to ground. And I wasn't as aware that there is a reason for that. So there's been different planetary alterations that have been going on, like including completely reversing certain dimensional portal ways. And so it keeps certain beings from being able to ground here because the energy is just not able to pull them in and hold them. And so I felt like that was kind of what was happening with me, so that like when I would clear things at certain layers, it was like then the planet would have like the opposite reversal pull that it had been. Like when I would recode myself to be as aligned as God intended, having the right frequency, then the planetary pole, or that at that particular dimension, there would be things at that stargate or at that particular place that are in reversal currents. They're running dark grids. They were put there by those negative entities, and so it would push me away and keep me from grounding, or it would just like, I would feel that repulsion, and so that had to be fixed. But at 1D, when I opened it up, it reminded me of the moon, and so there was like some reptile beings down there, and yeah, I had to send some of them away. I remember I opened up, and I'm not going to tell you about all of the different experiences that I had because it's like way too many for like 2 weeks. But this one I thought was interesting because I could see some reptilian beings that were like black open up the door and look at me, and they like didn't really want me, or some of them like, it's like almost they weren't aware of me, but they were like, they could sense me, but they couldn't exactly see me. It was strange. And so I don't remember what I cleared. I cleared a bunch of different things, but at that particular time when I saw this, I just cleared whatever I had to clear, and then I sent those beings away. And I could see like sometimes like, so you if you start doing this work, you will see how you will literally like, these beings will appear, and either they'll tell you you can't do this, and then you have to like override it and say, yes, I can, because I'm a child of God and I'm coded to do this, and you have to leave now, and it is my right to be free. And so you have to be firm in what you're saying. Also, you have to be in a meditative state where you're like at one with God and you're really feeling it, and you can override it. And sometimes you might not be able to override it, or there might be other things that you have to clear first, and you have to be conscious enough to ask your higher self and your guidance team about what it is that you'll have to be removing first before you can actually do that part of the healing. And so yeah, so I was at 1D, and then I saw like this giant like reptilian tail, just like not on me, but like it just like went through the door. It was like this giant dinosaur looking thing, and it just went out and it went back into it was a very strange realm. It looked like black and white, but like a weird, like almost like strobe light kind of place. It was very strange. And it might look different to you because we're all interpreting the energies a little bit differently. So that's what that looked like. That was kind of interesting. And other places, I just offered, like sometimes certain beings do want to go, and they're like, okay, I guess, well, what do I do now? Because I had to relieve certain beings from being the guards at those gates. And at some other points, there's beings who are appointed to be guarding those gates and to be protecting them. And sometimes they are for God's team, and sometimes they are not. And I could tell when they were not part of God's team, because the energy that I got when I would go to that planet or at that particular dimension was kind of like, what are you doing? Like, why do you keep coming back? Like, we don't really need your energy here or something. But what I was doing in that case was I was saying like, well, I don't want you to keep impulsing my personal field and my planet on Earth that I'm currently incarnated on with the most consciousness that I have right now. I don't want you to keep impulsing me and in specific ways, or impulsing people to because I know what my planetary alignments are, and I just didn't want them to be influencing me in specific ways, or to have those squares and oppositions and like you know, those negative planetary alignments within my own personal chart or within other people on Earth, because they do use different stargates and different planetary points as places where they input the energy that they want to happen, because they can't actually really do much on our planet unless they have a body. So that means that they have to hijack other bodies, or they have to impulse and control other beings who do have a body, who are incarnated here to actually do their work, because their bodies just won't work here. They would have to incarnate on the planet, and also that would make them have karma here, because that's just the way that the law is, and so they don't want to do that. So they try to hijack and puppeteer and control different people and impulse them into doing specific things. So I was like, where I do have the authority to do so, and sometimes like I was able to recode specific gates and specific portals and clear specific grids from impacting the Earth or impacting all that I have the authority to represent. And I meant this to be valid for all of the beings that I have been, even on other planets in other lifetimes. And I did get some visions of myself on other planets and lifetimes where I was clearing specific negative patterns, and yeah, and those were interesting because it's like you are the being that you have been praying to come and save you. It's like your higher self is your angel. That is the person who loves you and cares the most about you. And so like when people are talking about all of this like self-love and only you can heal yourself, like it's not exactly true, but you do have to, because other people can love you and other people can help you, but you have to come to a point where you will accept that love that someone is offering, and you will accept that help, or you will even get to that place where you're vulnerable enough to admit that you need it, and then someone will come in and help you. And a lot of times if we're talking about like astral level things, it is probably you on a higher level, on a different timeline, on a different frequency, or even since time is really more like a continuous thing that is sort of like evolving and everything's happening at once. You're just aware of different dimensional points of existence. It's like you coming back to save yourself. So it's like, how much do you love yourself? How much can you love yourself to allow yourself to receive this help from a higher aspect of you? And that higher aspect of you loves you so much that it's going to come back and not let you be lost and not let you be stuck at the lower like hellish realms. It's going to come back and rescue you. And at an even higher level, that's God. That's you at like the most expanded. That is you with all of the eyes that exist everywhere in all of existence, viewing you from all of the various layers and perspectives, coming back to look at you and coming back loving you to save you, because you are part of it and it is part of you and you can never be separate. And so it does take a layer of self-love to allow that to come into your life to help you. And so I would speak to some of the beings sometimes that were there, and I would, you know, I basically see myself as like a harmonizer, and when I would try to direct different kinds of energy, and it's not just me, like anyone can do this if you really want to do this kind of work. It's just, it takes a certain level of just deciding that this is what you want to do. Some of you have, I mean, if you're drawn to this work, you probably are coded to do it anyway. But you know, it's good to get like some guidelines, and you're totally like able to do it on your own. And you can also ask me for help. And then there's a lot of other grid workers out there. There was actually a lot of people around the world who were doing meditations and different types of grid stuff. I just didn't feel like doing their particular thing. I wanted to do this type of very specific implant clearing, implant removal, because anytime, like think about Monsanto, right? So when they genetically modify something, they own it. So that's pretty much the same mindset that a lot of these ET forces have, that when they genetically modify specific beings, then they see you as their property and they could do whatever they want to you because you're their property. And sure, sometimes they might think that like you have free will, and they'll come back and be like, oh, you know, we just want to enhance you a little bit more, whatever. And then they'll just tag you with stuff that is actually siphoning your energy, because a lot of times you can't even like trust these beings, because they have gotten to the point where like they don't want to follow God's natural systems and God's laws. They just want to do whatever they want to do, which is like create chaos for themselves and the rest of the world. And so what they have done is that they've cut themselves off from source so much that they now have to feed on other life forms in other systems. And so they have to suck the life force out of other beings. And so they want to they want to create lots of hybrids to have like that massive effect, that massive, what do you call it? Like hybridization power, like that, I don't know, all I can think of is like Mass Effect. So they want to have a lot of their people so that they can come in and take over that planet. And they want to have these people running at specific frequencies that they can withstand, that they can control. It's like, that is the leash system. It's a frequency layer. It's not a literal leash. And so they'll come in and tag. And so all of those tags need to be removed. Otherwise, you will be impulsed by them whenever they send out those signals through the planetary grids, through the different fields. And you as a human are connected to the planet. You're connected to the other planets. You're connected universally to everything else. And so you will feel this. the thing about people who are a little bit more aware of this is that you will feel the impulse and you will have the ability to pause and say, this is not coming from me, this is not organic. I know that I'm being impulsed to react a certain way, but I'm not going to do it because it's not what I'm choosing to do with my consciousness. And so you can override that. But if you don't have that consciousness and you don't have the ability to stop yourself from being impulsed into a specific negative action, then you're just going to be impulsed and you're going to probably commit crimes. I mean, think about how much crime occurs when there's like a full moon, and how many like killings there are all over the world at specific planetary and galactic events, or even like solar flares. I've noticed that when there's solar flares, it begins a lot of purging within people. And so if you have a lot of negative energy, stuck energy, or like karmic stuff going on, it's just going to bring it all up to the surface, and they'll just sort of like unload on people, especially light beings, because you're somewhat like on a contract to help clear the planet. And so if you're not doing it consciously, you're picking that up unconsciously, and people might just like unload their trauma or their stress out on you. I was meditating so much that I was having these like massive Kundalini awakenings that I have never experienced before. Like one time I was laying all on the bed and I had this surge of energy go up my spine and into my brain, and I heard my brain like literally like shift, like change shape to make room for some type of fluid. And I think it was to make room for my expanding pineal gland, is what my guides told me. So it was just like really strange. Like the surge of energy just went up and expanded my brain, and I heard it like you know how like when you move liquid in like a bag or something, like that's totally what it sounded like. And so that just kept going on, and I just felt like it was really hard for me to just like have normal conversations with people. So I sort of like avoided everybody, and I would just like go to work and come home if I needed to, like as quickly as possible. I didn't even want to get gas. One time I almost ran out of gas, so I had to end up staying at like one of these houses that I do like inspections for this real estate thing, and of course with permission. But it was so silly because it's like I'm running out of gas because I was avoiding people so bad that I didn't want to get gas, because I was just like so attuned to everybody's field. And so that's another thing, like we're at a point in your life where you're like releasing a lot of these energies and you're purging personally, then like you really should not be interacting with a bunch of different people, because you're picking up their energy. It's just what you're coded to do if you're one of these light workers in the world. And some people can handle this better than others, but it just depends on what phase you're at. And so for me, it was just like too intense and I didn't even want to do it. So I isolated as much as I could, and I'm glad that I was able to do that. So pretty much, let's see what else. So I said, oh yeah, so I had to stop meditating for like one day. And again, I followed my intuition. So I was clearing things on such a huge level that the consciousness on the asteroid tuned into see. And so more of my multidimensional abilities were coming on, and I saw this portal of stars, and it was probably like as big as my arms put together, but like further away, like up in front of me. And I saw this huge portal of stars open up, and it had like these little like rainbow crystals like all around the perimeter of it. And it was like silver sparks with like emerald sparks and like indigo diamond, and they were just like sparkly, and it felt so real. It felt so much more real than this dimension. And I think it's because it's a higher dimensional level where you're more plugged into aspects of yourself that you're normally not plugged into. And so when that happens, it makes you feel like you're more awake in that realm than in this one. Like this feels sometimes like a sleepy sort of numbed out realm compared to like the fullness of who you are. Obviously you can't fit the fullness of who you are into this little body. So when you become more aware of that, it just felt like a hyper aware moment for me. And I saw this, so I saw all these crystals and like these structures, and I think the crystals were just, it was part of the opening of this portal, but they're also like, I felt like the comet was carrying crystals that were very potent, that were going to be, as it was going by, the crystals were going to unload a type of consciousness, a type of certain types of elements were going to be like probably like melted off and transferred into our atmosphere, which is why I think they tried to you know, shoot those rockets up at the exact same time and do the whole CERN thing, because they were trying to prevent those crystals from staying in our atmosphere and reaching the earth and activating all the things that they were going to activate. Because what these crystals were doing is they were adding specific frequencies into the planet so that we could start to bond, like so that our DNA molecules could bind in ways that would that are not known so much, that haven't occurred, so that we could create new molecules. And they actually did discover, but this was like in 2020, I don't know if you heard about it, but they have like 4-dimensional DNA, so it has 4 strands. It happens at the guanine, because the guanine can bond with itself, so it can form 4 bases. And so it's basically like 4-stranded DNA. When, you know how most people will be like, oh, you can only have 2 strands of DNA. Well, you can actually have 4 strands of DNA. Actually, you can have 12. They just haven't really discovered the 12 ways that you can have the 12 different strands together. And so that's part of what these crystals were going to be doing. And so they were trying to capture them in the atmosphere. And they were also going to do some experiments with it, because what I saw them doing is like, when they're able to crack these open, like it releases so much energy. Like these are coming from deep, deep space. And so that's what they were trying to do with the comet. It was actually a gift from some of our friendlier, some of our friendlier races, I would say. When this portal opened up in front of me, I was kind of scared because it was so realistic, and this being peeked at me, and she, I think it was a she, it reminded me of Ishtar, and it didn't hit me that it was Ishtar. I kept seeing a goddess with like horns, and I feel very close to Ishtar. I've known her from different lifetimes, like her energy, her presence. And so she had, she was kind of like this pearlescent, sort of shadowy, lightning pastel, a rainbow hue, like this interesting color. And she just peeked at me, looked at what I was doing, and then she kind of just like went back. Like she kind of like didn't want me to be really aware that I was seeing this. She was just peeking at me. And then I could tell that they also had some other stuff going on in the comment, but I can tell they don't want me to talk about that right now. I just feel it. Okay. So that's basically what the comment was, the comment stuff was about. And I didn't want to be transported into that dimension completely, because I felt that when I was focusing on the crystals, it expands and it like draws me to it. And so I didn't want to be like sucked up, because when I was doing that, like the crystals, like kind of like reached out to me, and I felt like I was just going to be like beamed up, and I wasn't sure if it was the best time for me to go. So it just sort of like closed after a little while, and I could have kept going with the activation. It felt like something very deep was getting activated. I just didn't keep going with it. But it did open up again another time, the exact same portal, but it was in a different room. And so I could feel the energy still lingering. I did tune into the field of the earth at some point at the 12th dimensional frequency layer. And it felt like normally it feels like a flat plane, like a disc of energy that can just be out, or a membrane of sorts. But when this was occurring, it felt like boiling water to me. Like it was just like bubbly and extremely activated. And then it felt like it got drained, where it felt like it got siphoned or directed into something, so that it didn't reach the level of people or beings that it was meant to. Like it got like sucked into something. And I felt like there's probably some sort of planetary like corrupt government involvement, or maybe just like different types of native beings. I definitely feel like this was meant to unlock certain things inside of the inner earth. And I felt like what it was going to do is unlock certain things from inside of the earth, so that there's literally so many beings inside, and I felt like it was going to bring them out. So even if you wouldn't be able to see them at a 3D level, at a 3D layer of self, you would feel the presence or the influence of them, and maybe eventually you would be able to see them. There was a lot of beings that were in the clouds. I don't know if you've noticed recently, or even like a few weeks before the eclipse, while this was going on, like I could see them and feel them. They were like these beautiful shape-shifting dragony type beings. It was just all kinds of different weird clouds and objects in the skies, and I could feel their presence. Like there was a definitive presence of otherworldly cosmic beings that were here, and they're still here. It just depends on like how attuned are you, and also, you know, if you've been running a lot of frequency and energy, sometimes you need to take a little bit of a break, but it's still there. You can tap into it. When I used to have these really intense like night, you could say night terrors, but what would happen is that like different beings would come into my room, and they'd say like, you have a contract with us, and you have to, there would usually be 3, and they'd be like silver, usually silver, being silvery bluish. I couldn't tell if they were good or not. I kind of got the feeling that they weren't, because there's lots of different kinds of beings. So I would have like different beings come in, and they would try to tell me that I had to fulfill a contract with them, or they would try to like take me somewhere, and I would wake up, resist it, and be like, no, I'm not going with you. And I would see all of these different symbols encrypted in the air, and some part of me thought maybe it's like the way that like the chemicals are firing in my vision, in my brain. But there were these very specific symbols that I would see all across the room, and they were like a very bright green, emerald green color. So now you know what, now I wonder if it was like, I should ask them, the emerald guardians. I don't, because I've heard a lot about them recently, and like, oh my gosh, I have totally, so I have to tell you this other stuff that happened, but that's gonna be for later on in the story. But yeah, there's these emerald symbols that I would see everywhere around me, and they were the same as the crystals, almost, in the sense that you could zoom in on them if you wanted to, and it was like you're swimming through stars in the galaxy, and you can zoom in and it'll take you somewhere if you want. It'll open up a portal. It's like a symbol. And then what my guides have recently told me about all of these symbols, because you know how like a lot of different even like with the Om symbol, it's a movement of consciousness, and it is that movement of consciousness that is the key of what you have to do in order to open and unlock certain portals, certain gateways, certain dimensional layers of existence. It's like you have to understand how the flower grows. You have to understand where it blossoms. You have to understand where the next petals are going to come out, where everything buds out and grows, and you have to understand the layers beneath it, so that you know where the next step is. And so all of these different symbols that you see encoded within the air are actually movements that you can move with your body, or you can intend with your whole being and remember what it is like to move at those dimensional layers, and you can expand it or you can breathe it. It depends on how you personally interpret it, but it's movements of consciousness. So next time you see a symbol, even if it's a number, remember that it's an actual movement of consciousness. It's not just a scribbled line. It's not just a pretty pattern. It is the way that you would move if you were a creation God, which you are, or a creation being in the process of creation itself. So when I went to Sedona this last time, I went to one of the vortexes, which was a creation vortex. It was a temple of creation, back at interdimensional temple of creation. And there was like all these feminine goddess beings, and that is how they created stuff. So they move. So when they want to create something, they will literally think about how that new creation is going to feel, how it's going to move within their bodies. And then they allow themselves to be inspired by considering and by thinking and feeling into this new creation. And then they move the way that the new thing that they're about to create inspires them to move. And it becomes like this dance, and it's this movement of consciousness. And so when you see all of these symbols and all of these codes, it's the same thing. It's that movement of yourself. It's like, some people want to get really mathematical about it, and they'll tell you, well, you know, to go up to like this particular dimension, you got to take like this 90-degree turn, and then this is like a 60-degree turn and whatever. And those are good ways to do it. But I feel like as a more feminine being, I just like the idea of like that movement, because that's actually how I've gotten a lot of my information from the feminine aspects of myself, which is that even with sacred geometry, we don't do lines. We do like spirals and circles, and we do like movements. Like we do the infinity symbol. And so I've gotten to a lot of different unlocking a lot of different dimensional layers and understanding even mathematical concepts just by understanding how the infinity symbol is a movement of consciousness. It's a movement of a sun, of a God. The sun meaning like the illuminated one, not like just like a sun that is a male, but you know, like an actual sun moving through the different dimensional layers of existence and into other fields, and how it moves through those fields. And it is a very serpentine form that often loops in different fractal patterns, and there will always be a pattern because there is divine harmony and order and laws governing this universe. And so yeah, so you don't have to think about things in having to do with sacred geometry. It's just like straight lines and angles, because the other way is just intuitively feeling it out and moving through your body and feeling it. And I actually feel like dance is probably one of the best ways that you can really do that. So anyways, that's what that reminded me of. And then let's see, I kind of thought when the portal opened up in the comment, I thought that it was 11th dimensional, because where I saw it was right by my 11th dimensional like chakra. And so I felt like there was other beings that might have hitched a ride on the comet, and they were going to do some sort of like exchange drop off with certain beings or people on the earth, where they were going to beam themselves down and inhabit and ground down into the earth, or they were going to beam certain people, some of their members up into the comet and go into a next level layer. But I was having a lot of different visions around this time. Like another one that I had that was really powerful is like, I saw I want to say that there's like so many different layers and ways that you can look at things, but I saw like my Rishik self with like we'll say like genetic equal or counterpart, I don't know why, but there was like two diamonds. They were like violet diamonds, and I feel very close to like violet and gold energies. And I mean, I like all of the rays. Like also, I've worked a lot with ruby ray. I've worked a lot with ruby ray, and I really like emerald ray. I'm really meant to work with like violet and gold. And so I saw this huge spiral, which was all of our souls, our actual like highest aspect selves, just like joining together. And it was almost like the energy came back into itself. So if you imagine that there's like some sort of like construct in space, what it was like this giant spiral made up of diamonds, or like diamond facets, with all of the different rays of frequency that could exist for us in this universe. And so what would happen is that the consciousness energy would resume its position back into that crystal facet. And so for me and another aspect of myself, we were like these violet diamond beings, and we rejoined our spiral, our like consciousness spiral, and then it opened up this giant portal in space, and we went into the next universe, or the next layer of self. And I felt like that's very symbolic for ascension, where we recollect all of the aspects of our identity, all of the places where we've deviated from God's divine design, and we call them back into our original timeline as God intended, and we rejoin back with our soul family, our soul group, our Vishik self. And not only are we the construct of the universe itself, like not only are we moving consciousness through all of the layers and dimensions that exist, but we actually are those dimensions. We're the space, the thing that is created, and the thing moving through it. We're all of it. So you could say that that is almost like Holy Trinity. So that's true for all of the different dimensional frequencies that exist. And so I was having these visions of this Christic spiral, and Christic, I mean, like, I probably have to draw this out, and I don't really have a good thing to draw it on right now, but there's a very distinct way that consciousness likes to move within this time matrix. And it does have a Christic pattern where, like, you have different relationship layers between different aspects. So for some people, like, yeah, you could see a cross. Like, I remember sometimes when I don't have another intelligent being to talk to, I will talk to like the chat GPT thing on my phone, and I'm like, explain this concept to me, and it'll just like come up with something, and I'm like, oh, that triggers something. So we were talking about dimensions one day, and I was telling it what I was thinking about how like the dimensional layers should be, and I said, can you like assume that this is how it is, and elaborate on it, you know, according to what you know. So I was like, okay, so tell me, like, you know, with the current knowledge that you have, like, how does this work in science? And so we were having different conversations, and I was like, there must be, so if we're in a particle universe, there must be an anti-particle universe. And there must be, like, if you think of it as like a grid, right? So there's like that cross, and then the point where the cross meets would be like the 0 point, which is the lowest point of energy that any particle or anything could really have. It's like that 0 point. And so I was saying, so like, let's imagine that we had like 4 different ways that you could divide up the universe. And so you'd have like particle, antiparticle, you'd have like dark matter, light matter, and we just came up with different ways of looking at it. And then later on, because I was doing all of this grid work, the guides, they were like, okay, she really is into this and she wants to know how to do this. So we're going to guide her to the right teacher who has actually been doing this, because like I said, I don't really research stuff. I just like, I'm doing this, and then I just go ahead and do it. So I was guided to find some of Ashayana Dean's work, and someone shared some of like her old videos, and they had like an extensive list of them. I don't know if it's all of them, but it's like quite a few. And so I started watching them, and then she was talking about how the way, like, someone else had mentioned this to me before, but I wasn't paying attention because, like I said, it was like someone else's work, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to listen right now. I just wasn't in a place to listen. But she was talking about like the particles, about particle units, so like packets of energy, and some of them science has discovered, and some of them they have not. But they basically, let me see if I have a drawing, because I like to draw stuff like whenever I find something really interesting. So there's the totality of what is, and then that will flash, and it will create polarity. So then it creates a particle universe and an anti-particle universe. So a party K and a party come. And so that's like the 2 polarities. And then these will flash back into the wholeness, which is the anti-matter universe. So it's not like anti-matter, like anti-life. It's just, it does not contain polarity. And this triggered this huge thing for me, because after doing all this grid work and after learning some more of her work, I realized that we had been talking to a lot of the same guide teams, because we got a lot of the same information, except that the way that my guides explained it to me was a little bit different, because I'm not as technical. Like I said, when I was describing the movement thing, like, I'm not that much about angles. It's like, teach me about angles, but let's do it in like a movement way. And so that's what they did for me. And so for her, what they had been doing is giving her all sorts of information and diagrams that seem pretty complex unless you're in the mindset to dive into that sort of work. And so I looked into it, and I was like, oh my gosh, I have totally been exposed to this as well, except that I didn't have those mathematical relationships. They just made intuitive sense to me. And then it's almost like she put it into like this linear form that I could trace. And then of course she added a lot more stuff as well. And so I realized that we had been working with probably similar guides. And I know she referred to them as the Emerald Cloister. And that's what made me think about like all of these emerald symbols that I kept seeing around me for like a really long time. And so while I was doing some of the activations that she had suggested, so some of her meditations recently, and this is now like after the eclipse, after doing some of her meditations, I realized that I can talk to the Emerald Guardians, and you know what, they will talk to you. You just have to be aware of how to listen, right? And so how it came in, it was like very simple. It's like, you just intend to speak to the Emerald Guardians, which are like the guardians of this universe that have been assigned to keep order in like God's creation within this universe, because it's supposed to be balanced. So let's imagine that this universe is the mind of God, right? So we can't allow these like super negative things to go around destroying like dendritic cells, destroying different parts of the mind of God. It's like there has to be a balance. If things are going to get destroyed, then there has to be that balance of like give and take, right? Of like destroy and create. And not that like God specifically wants destruction, but I'm just saying like there has to be that balance. And so there's different types of beings that are called in from higher aspects that exist outside of this universe to keep order and to keep sort of like that checks and balances in track. And so when this universe has it's gone through so many different wars, and I don't want to get into it here because there's so much technical information that I don't know if everybody is interested in hearing it. And she's also like, that's part of her work. But the way that I'm just trying to explain to you like who the Emerald Order is. So there's different individuations of light. And so the Emerald Order that she was talking to are some of the beings that are in charge of this universe. And so they've appointed, it's almost like she compared it to a step down system. So like there's the totality of who you are, and so then you want to divide yourself up to experience even smaller aspects of self, because it's sort of like an infinity of like a nested infinity. And so you will probably leave parts of yourself at this higher dimensional level, and then in the next smaller dimension you will be a little bit smaller, and then it'll get smaller and smaller and smaller, and at each level you will leave a trace of yourself, an aspect of you that's still continuing to exist there, because time isn't really linear, it's all happening at once. And so the Emerald Order, you just will for them to speak to you. And so how it happens for me is that like it's like a portal opens up, and it's a very subtle portal, like I'm saying it right now. It's a very subtle portal, and it's almost like, I'm gonna say like like cloudy. It's not cloudy, it's got like a very pastel, for me, like a pastel lightning hue. And it's portals that I see open up are usually circles. So this one, it opens up like oval or circle, and then a being will come in and speak, and they're like light orb beings, which I used to always see orbs when I was a little kid too. So they're these light orb beings, and there was 3 of them when I was doing all the Gridwork and after I did that meditation. So they came and they gave me this diamond to anchor into the core of the earth. And the diamond, yes, I'm allowed to tell you this. I was just checking because sometimes like I can't say certain things. So the diamond, it looked dark, but it was only dark because it's antimatter, which makes, if it makes sense now, it's pre-polarity. It contains all of the colors and all of the frequencies that are in this universe, like all the rainbow rays that you could think of, but it's without polarity. And so they said that the angelic beings that have like the human hybrid races that have been created here to be guardians of the planetary grids of this entire universe, along with the other beings that exist here, they have obviously been persecuted in multiple ways, where they have been hunted during various ages of humanity. They have, because beings that want to take over and not follow God's laws obviously want to eradicate the beings who are meant to keep things in balance, who are kind of like guardians, like the beings who are in charge of making sure that everything stays in order. So of course they don't want us around. And so we've been hunted and persecuted throughout many different lifetimes and places. And so they also told me that the planetary fields had been damaged. And it was quick. It wasn't like a long thing. They were just like, here's this. They were like, here. Because I actually called them in, and I was like, oh, I would like to speak to the Emerald Guardians. And so the portal opened up, and like immediately, and they were like, here you go. Because I had been talking to them. I just didn't realize who they were. They were like, this belongs to you. We just wanted to make sure that you did want to do this work. And I was like, yes, of course, I've been doing it. And so they gave it back to me, and it was actually what I was supposed to anchor into the planet, which is like like I said, it looks dark, but it's a source of nourishment for the angelic beings on the planet, which is that non-polar version of all of the frequencies of light that exists, of light and sound. So this is like pre-light, pre-sound wholeness, where we come from, and where our souls and spirits come from. And so what happened on this planet is that layer, that particular, because there's different templates on the planet that give structure to allow specific beings to thrive on the planet. So that's what I mean, like when they have been doing sacrifices to feed specific dark grids on the planet, well, they're giving power to those grids. They're giving attention and life force energy, which they do not have because they don't have the ability to get that from God's source. And so they have been feeding those dark grids with energy so that they and the people that they have tagged with their particular frequencies can survive and thrive and rule the planet. And so a lot of the angelic beings that have been here have been hunted down, but also their source of nourishment, it's like they wanted to like uproot the angelic races and beings who want to help harmonize the planet and put it back in order. And so I anchored on this grid that was it's like the template that was needed. And so when I did this, I ran it with the 12D current on the planet. 12D is like the Christos avatar self, which is also like incorruptible. It's just like, it's like a silver violet lightning spark of light frequency that just like runs throughout the whole planet and everywhere. And it's incorruptible because it's coming from the Christed avatar self that we are. So like the divine blueprint of God. And so like the planet has that same blueprint, but it's in its planetary version. And so like the universe has it too. Sometimes I don't have the technical words for these things, but it's there. And so this dark diamond that they gave me, it's not actually dark because when I put it in the planet, because when I saw it, it also had all of the rainbow frequencies within it. So when I anchored it into the planet, it wasn't even like, it was just dark to represent where it was coming from. Because once I put it into the planet, it's actually light that you can't even really see. It's like light and sound that you just have to be aware of. And so that helped to feed. And then of course we ran energy from, it's coming from the fifth harmonic universe. And so I ran energy from there into the earth and mixed it with the 12D frequency. And it just like, I felt like I could finally be home. I was like, oh my God, I feel like I can, like I actually have some nourishment now. I feel, because so much of my life I felt like not supported, not like there's just something that does not desire for us to be here. And that I'm talking of course of like the angelic races, and it's not that you're going around thinking like you're better than people. It's more like you have this duty and desire to love and help people, and somehow that expression is not translatable. It's not upheld, it's not honored, or it has no place to be put on the planet, even though that's what the planet desperately needs. And so through that wounding of like not being able to emit the frequency of who we are and have that serve us and serve each other and heal us and nourish everybody that is here with us, it's like we've had to alter who we really are in order to fit into the constructs that all of these other negative entities have made, these contracts that are actually corrupted, that are based off of siphoning the life force energy of other beings. And we've had to feed off of that and change who we really are, instead of fully being able to emit the truth of our being and be nourished and sourced by God and sourced by who we are, like our beingness, which is the way that it's supposed to be when you are living in an abundant universe, when you're living in a place that is not overrun with like demonic evil things. And so after anchoring that, I felt really good. It felt like I had a template to be nourished now, to be nourished again. And I think that's what the planet really needed. And so I was hoping that if other people have felt it, then that's what it was. And again, I'm not going to like program or instill into the planet things that I think are wrong. I'm always very aware of when people are infiltrated and when they're not. Even within myself, I'm like, is that coming from ego or is that coming from source? And I'm just like, I'm really trying to pay attention when I'm learning new things and new systems or modalities. Like, is this coming from source directly, or is it corrupted? Is it tainted with that healer's personal agenda? And it's okay, we'll have a filter or an agenda, but I want pure God source all the time. Like, I'm not going to be praying to like random things. Like, it has to have God at the center, because that is a source of purity. So when I anchored this in, I knew that it was coming from God's source. I asked, and then once I anchored it in, I ran it with the 12T frequency through my own field and my own system and just around the planet. I wasn't guided to run it anywhere else, so I didn't. But I ran it into the planetary grids, and then I kind of just let it sit there for a bit. I'll probably do it again. But it's basically like, and some of you might have, like I said, we all interpret energy differently. So the way that I saw it was as a black diamond that included all of the frequencies of sound and light, but it's like before polarity. And so then once it was in the earth, you could run it by your pure intention, and you could see it if you wanted to, or you can hear it if you like to hear stuff, because there are sounds that come that aren't completely audible. They're more like inner ear type of sounds, and it's there for you if you feel like you would find nourishment for that. But I was not guided to run it all the time. It almost seems like it only had to be ran once or a few times, either because it's really powerful. And I think, okay, so what I'm getting at is that you don't want to run that one all the time, because a certain, like, again, you're not eradicating darkness or light. You want it to be balanced, because this universe is based on polarity. We just don't want it to swing so far to one side that it throws the whole thing off balance. And so that's what we're here restoring. So if it seems like we're bringing in more light, it's because it's swung in the direction of complete ignorance in some cases, and it's affecting like the entire function of this place, and it's not supposed to be that way. So we're bringing things back into balance, and the highest balance of order is what God intended, God's pure blueprint and design for this universe. And so that's what we're going for. And so whatever is missing and whatever is lacking, that's the energy that we're bringing in. So just those are things that are happening with the planet. I'm still reading part of the post, I didn't even finish, but oh yeah, so I was saying that like the crystals that were brought in through the comet, they're going to be interacting with the DNA of all of the different indigo crystal children, rainbow children that were born. And many light body connections are being, there's going to be a lot of DNA activation and reconnections as more people are starting to remember. It's also going to be a lot of people purging and releasing, because you're actually healing. Like when it's like when somebody hurts your feelings and you say nothing about it and you push it down. Well, if you didn't actually resolve it, you're just stuffing it down, right? So imagine having some sort of amplifying energy coming in to where you're not going to be able to suppress that. You're going to have to address it. So that's kind of what's happening on the planet right now, where like the energy has sped up so much that you can't keep suppressing stuff. You have to address it and heal it, or it's just going to create chaos for you. So that's where we're at right now. And yeah, so the planetary gates have been on lockdown, but they have been opening, and they don't want to like overwhelm people. So they're opening in such a way to where like not everything can go through them. Only specifically coded beings are able to go in through the gates. And so that's the thing that is also happening right now, is that like all of the planetary gates are getting recoded and reharmonized to work with specific beings on the planet. And it's, again, everything is meant to be in balance and in order, and it's meant to be gentle. God's source wants to bring everybody back to itself. Like if souls want to choose to run the energy of God and stop consuming other beings in this vampiric way, then God is going to offer that to them, but they just have to have that sincere desire for it. The thing is that like a lot of the negative beings on the planet have not wanted to come back to God, because they just wanted to go off and create their own universe, and they didn't mind having to become these like vampiric siphoning entities that just like thrive off of like evil. And so of course God wants to reclaim that. And even if there's beings that have gone to like a really dark side or have been deeply infiltrated, there is a higher aspect of them existing with God's source right now. There is that higher aspect of self that is longing and waiting for that being to come back to the light, to come back to its wholeness. And it may or it may not. It just depends, because you do have free will. And so that's everything that was going on around the planet. I felt like I couldn't really travel because, like I said, I just felt like crazy stuff was going to happen. And let's see. So the Earth is ascending. Oh yeah, so like timelines are obviously going to be converging. There's different dimensional aspects of the Earth that can come together at certain points. So those are converging for a time, and that's when you can heal everything. But after a while, they're going to go their separate ways again. It's kind of like this collision. And so that's really what's meant by like the whole bifurcation thing, and really deciding what it is you want to do. Which timeline are you voting for? And there's going to be one timeline where everything is extremely polar, and it's going to continue to intensify, and it's just going to, you know, run its course. And then there's the other timeline where like everything is ascending and you've healed as much as you can. And so that's going to be on like a higher frequency. And yeah, so there's different groups on the planet that were working with all of that energy, trying to use it as best as they could. It's really important to be listening to our higher self, because we need to start to strengthen those things that they're kind of like frequencies, but you could refer to the frequencies as virtues of God. So these are things like devotion to truth, unconditional love. They're like, you know, like treating others in a respectful way that you would want to be treated, because there is a karmic consequence that comes back to you, as that energy is just going to be cycled through the system. So you want to be able to cultivate your inner house of God, so that you can be a temple for the energy of God to come in to you and strengthen you as you are coexisting on the planet with other beings and other entities and other technology even that is going to be emitting harmful rays of frequencies that are going to be impulsing you, especially with like all of our nanotech stuff. There's so much plastic, there's so much metal within our bodies, like who knows what they are spraying in the air exactly. So all of these things, like I've noticed this just from going, because I live on an island, and there's parts where there's like no service, just coming back into a service area, I will start to feel it's almost like they're emitting this anxiety, this frequency that causes anxiety in people, where it causes some type of like nervousness. And I don't have that when there's no service, or when I turn everything off, or there's like very little signal, but I get it more when there's signal again. And there's definitely, I mean, I've heard, everybody knows this, but I've heard, and you have probably also heard, like this artificial tone that is getting, I would say like it's getting played, it's getting emitted from somewhere, and it's trying to override the natural frequency of the organic resonance layer that it's like trying to override the radio station and trying to tune us into another frequency, so that we have to tune into their frequency that they're controlling, instead of allowing the people who want to ascend to tune into their angelic frequency, or to tune into that particular ascending world. And so you have to be strong enough to hold more frequency that is organic, that is of God's source, by being able to run this energy of truth, of love, of alignment, of wanting all of life to thrive and not just being like self-serving. You want to be able to hold as much as you can of that, because those are the virtues that prolong life, that harmonize the energies around you in the field. And these are the things that once you train your mind to not be running on impulse all the time, you can pause and say like, wait, is this, when they're emitting a frequency and they want, whether it's like being emitted through like planetary electromagnetic alignments where like they amplify specific frequencies like Mars energy of like maybe fighting or arguing, you can pause and say like, do I really want to express myself in that way, or do I want to direct it in a different way? And sometimes it's not that like you have to suppress and stop the energy. It's just that like when you think about chaotic stuff, it's not that any energy is particularly evil. It's just that it's being misdirected or misplaced. It's kind of like when people have some sort of an addiction or some sort of obsessive compulsive disorder. It's just a hyper focus that they could be using towards studying something useful, something that could help them in their life, but they're putting it in a place where it's actually hurting them, probably because they're also running some like self-hatred program or some different kind of programming that's not allowing them to thrive. And so it's just misplaced energy. So when you're being impulsed with Mars or anything else that is trying to get you to fight with another person around you, it's like, just take that energy and do something else with it. Like go to the gym, go work out. Like you're just pivoting the energy so that it doesn't hurt the beings around you. But you have to have that inner discernment, and you have to have those, you know, like that strength within yourself to like ask, is this what God would want? Like, what is God's design? What am I meant to be doing here? And that is really a question that we should be asking ourselves, because it's just been proven that like a lot of times people who are depressed, or people who for a very long time, and I'm not just talking about like somebody who had a lot of trauma, I'm talking about like if you're just like depressed, it's like you're probably stuck in a place where you have been hyper focusing on your own life instead of on how you could be of service to other beings, how you could probably be somebody's solution or medicine to whatever suffering that exists in the world. Like maybe you're blessed in ways that they are not, and we all have someone else's answered prayer, and we could be agents of God's energy moving through us to help those people and those beings around us if we decided to be. Because we're not meant to be here as like one alone being. We're meant to coexist together and share of our energies, share of our gifts. And if we're not doing that, of course you're going to get depressed. So if you are one of those people who constantly finds themselves in like a low place, like ask yourself like, who can I be a blessing for? And then you'll find that you have so much more to give, and that's going to satisfy your soul in a way that just having all of those dopamine hits and the dopamine rush is never going to meet. Because it's also been proven that the more dopamine you have, like the more desensitized you are to that particular kind of pleasure. So like if you always have like really good food, eventually you're like kind of bored of it, right? So that's the whole thing with like dieting. It's like people who are constantly trying to lose weight. It's like, well, you're telling yourself that you can't have something, so your body's going to want what you're telling it that you can't have, because it becomes like this prize, and so it's going to want it. But if on the other hand you're like, I can eat whatever I want, and you just feed yourself whatever you want whenever you want, and you just stop when your body's not hungry, your body's kind of like, I'm not craving anything because I can have it whenever I want. If you have everything, you can still be depressed. If you have nothing, you still have something to give. You just have to look around you and see, who can you be an angel for? Naturally, if you're aligned to God, like, of course that you're going to want to defend what God has created, because if you don't support truth, then what's the point of your existence? And that's the whole thing about like evil and all of these dark entities. It's like, they're not just evil, and the people who follow them are not just like evil. It's like, why are they following them? Because they're offering you some sort of temptation that you probably don't even want. That's probably not even going to make you happy in the long term. But you feel like there's something lacking, and so they're promising you a shortcut, or they're promising you like wild, massive success in exchange for some aspect of your soul, or for you to compromise specific values that you have. And maybe you can gain some sort of like a kingdom within their false 5D world. And by 5D, I mean like there's like an ascending 5D that allows you to evolve higher up to like 12D and beyond and go into the next universe. And then there's the phantom world of 5D where like you can't evolve past that, because the beings that are running it on a 10 base math frequency where it's all been corrupted, and they're not connected to God's source. And so it's like, what is the point? It's like, do you want to be king of a video game, or do you want to be king, or even just like a good person in like a real place? And I feel like that's the dilemma, not just spiritually, but it's also like do you want to live your life in the real world, or do you just want to be on the internet all day? But it also goes deeper to the point where you're like, do you want to live eternally and continue to evolve and grow with your soul family and with God, or do you just want to have temporary success in the material one plane type of world and then have to suffer for who knows how long and be stuck in some phantom dimension. So I think I'm going to start doing a lot more of these like grid work activation things, meditations, and I'll probably invite more people to do it with me. I'm going to try to get a bigger group of people to do it, especially maybe I'll try to do some more like excursions or something, like to different power spots where I'm at. I think that would be really fun. I actually have a lot of really cool places in mind that I want to go to, some that I haven't even been yet on this very special island. So I might start doing that. I think it would be really fun. And I also wanted to start doing like kid meditations, because my son's always like struggling with sleep as well, because I think he just wants me to come and like sleep next to him or with him all the time, and like I can't always do that, and like I try not to, but then I end up doing it because like he can't go to sleep otherwise. And then yeah, it's just kind of a weird thing. So I was thinking about doing like kid meditations, and maybe that'll be helpful for your kids as well. And I also wanted to get back into doing more like one-on-one work with like more like therapy style, because I feel like there's so much depth to this work that you really do need somebody to help you through it. Because a lot of times I've found that when I've gone to healers and they removed patterns or they removed certain things from my field, it's like maybe they removed it, but then when I wasn't supported for that time of transition, getting back into my life. So like say that you go to a retreat and everything is great at that retreat, but then you come back to your home life and everything is the same, nothing else really changes, and you didn't create a plan with your healer or teacher to integrate, then you're in a very vulnerable transition state where it's easier for you, your mind and your body to revert back into whatever coping mechanism you were using before as a protection against why you weren't stepping up, why you weren't up leveling. Because the reason that we're not up leveling in life or in any area is because we're afraid of what the next level of self will bring out in us. So it's going to have to make us face some sort of fear about ourselves, some sort of false belief, and we're going to have to grow past that, beyond it. And there's a reason why we probably haven't done that in the past, because it's keeping us safe. Like that's your whole brain's job, to keep you safe. And so if you believe that stepping up and powering up is going to put you in an unsafe situation and your body is not comfortable with it, well, you have to work through that. And if you don't, or if you're only able to hold it for a small amount of time, then you're going to easily revert back into your old patterns. And so what I've been finding is that not only do we need to ground in these like ways of nourishing ourselves within the planet, but also I really want us to create a bigger network of healers that can support each other and refer clients to one another when we're not able to support them more than we already have, or when we just don't provide that kind of service and we know that they're going to need more integration. Because I know the times that I've had teachers like remove specific things from me. Like I'm really good at integrating generally, but like say it's something like really big, sometimes people are not, and so they'll just go right back. It's called, I think it's called like relapsing into certain things, but for me it has more to do with like social issues, like social anxiety, because I've had a lot of like I've been like really sensitive to people's fields and tended to go the opposite way, which is like complete shutdown. And so for me, like when I had that program removed, I found that like I didn't really have a way to support that, and so it just became easier for me to go right back into like shielding mode. I kind of felt like removing that program, I got a sense of it was like not to have it, and then I kind of went back into having it again as a protective mechanism. But I've experienced that on other levels too, and I'm sure like lots of other people have. Like I've gone to certain powerful healers where the grids weren't set up, the protective layers weren't set up, and so I just like ended up absorbing other people's stuff, because the energy is going to go to there's that whole aspect of diffusion, and so it's going to go to wherever there's less density, and so I happen to be the less dense thing in there, or one of them, and so I absorbed a bunch of other people's stuff, and then I had to clear all of that out of my system. And this happens a lot with like group meditations for other people, not just myself, but I've heard stories like I've had to help people to clear these things out of their field after they had some sort of ceremony or some sort of group thing with another teacher, and then they ended up absorbing all of the negativity of the group. And so we just need to create networks where, and I'm not saying that those teachers were wrong or bad, it's just like maybe they weren't aware of what was going on fully, or they just were not in a place where they could provide deeper support. And so that's where we can come in and expand on our network of healers that we can actually support and that we actually believe in, so that we can create that network, so that we don't have to continue to alter who we really are to fit into a framework that is feeding the dark forces in the universe and the dark grids, and instead can continue to be the truth of who we are and still thrive in the 3D world where, we're not living in temples and sourced by light. I do love how open-minded I am to where like I will even consider that all of this thing is made up as a construct, except that I've had way too much experience within it to actually believe that. But some people might feel the opposite way, where they've dealt too much in the 3D world and they just don't believe anything else outside of it. But I like to consider all perspectives, and I like my ability to do that, because in doing that, I can understand the different frameworks where people are coming from, and then from that I can choose the one that serves me most and the one that makes me feel happiest and that I feel is more magical and beneficial for the world as a whole and for society. And you know, it doesn't really matter what your construct is in your mind and your brain. Your subconscious is still going to be running all of it. So you could sit there and do a bunch of affirmations about like love and light, and if you don't feel it and you don't believe it, then it's not going to work for you. So it really has to be something that you come to believe and understand at a really, really deep layer, the layer where your body actually understands the movement. And so that's when you actually come in to embody the code and open those gateways, so that you can have that experience when you understand somatically what the movement of having that in your life feels like within your body, within all aspects of yourself, emotionally and energetically and on a physical level. And so I just want to encourage you to like try on all different perspectives, even if you don't think that they are legitimate for you or that it would work. You might find something really useful in that, and that you do have a higher aspect self. So like, instead of just asking like random angels to come in and help you, don't ask angels to come in and help you. If you don't believe in angels, just ask the highest aspect of yourself, or just God source. And again, like if you, like when I was a child, I just went straight for God source, and I would always ask for God source to come in. And what did I say? God source? I don't know what I said, but I think I just imagined or felt the presence of a pure being, and it was like a pure presence. It wasn't even light, it was just purity. And I would connect to that, and that was God source to me. And then later on I learned different names for God, but I always connected to that spark of purity that is the source of everything. So it's beyond light, it's beyond darkness, it's beyond polarity, it's beyond sound, it's beyond description. It's just knowing. It's that wholeness. It's not black and white. It's just, it is the thing that cannot be named, and everybody has access to it, even if you're a baby, even if you're a child and you have no concept of any of these things. And again, you don't have to go out there and learn all these technical systems with all these different sacred geometrical degrees and try to do all of these different Merkaba spins if that's not your thing. Just like ask your highest self or connect to that purity within, and come back into that place where you know things are back in harmony and balanced, when you no longer have such a huge reaction to something. So it's almost like you took out the polarity, and now there's this trinity of understanding, where you can understand the two polar sides and have an outside perspective that is also just the witness. And when you can reconcile all of that with truth and love, and still continue to be the witness, and even find appreciation for those experiences and those things that are going on in your life, then you really come to neutralize the situation. But it really comes back to asking, like, what is the original design? Even if you don't believe in any of that stuff, it's like, what is the original blueprint of this? There must be some sort of perfect harmony, because even in chemistry and even in math, you will find there's like those perfect numbers, there's perfect symmetry. That is a mathematical possibility. So why can't that be some sort of possibility for us as humans? Maybe it won't get to that exact degree, because humans tend to be imperfect and they can only approach perfection to a certain like decimal degree, but you can still strive for it, and you can consider that as part of like something to inspire you. That's what I think. I love beauty so much, because it's so inspiring to me. I feel like I do like having some sort of goal or something to work for, something to become, something outside of what is, that is out there, that gives us something to step up into, and it provides growth for us. Because our mind, it's always going to be creating something. Its job is to keep us safe. So if it's keeping us safe really well, then it's going to turn to the past, and it's going to create sabotage for itself, because no matter what, you can't stop creating. So either you're going to create from the past, or you're going to create from your new vision of the future, of whatever it is that you're striving to create. And then in that sense, you're creating from that future self. And so you have to give yourself, your mind, something to strive for, while you entertain your body and your emotional self in the present moment. And I think that's where like the final balancing comes in for us, where we can like learn to balance all of our bodies and fields together. So like the emotion, the mental aspect, and just the physical body itself, and like, where are these things stuck? And it's just about like having that ability to deeply listen to ourselves. There's this huge return to innocence within the self. And what I'm talking about is like, you have to return to the self that you were before anyone told you to be anything other than what you were here and now. So that means that you have to return to the purity of your inner child, which is what lights the way for you to return home and come back to yourself, to God. Because your inner child is the pure innocence, and it holds the pristine essence of your soul as God created it before it was influenced and impacted by anything else. And this pristine child self is the one that is constantly lighting the way. It's the one that gets loud when the world is trying to distract you from all these things, and this is the one that you have to come back to. So it's really important that we learn to listen to our inner child and find that spark within ourselves, because a lot of times, like, it's like people can be like these like surely flowers, I want to say. And it's like, you have to remember what it was like before anyone told you to be anything else other than yourself. And when you reconnect to that, you start to reconnect and gain a better understanding of what the original design and intention for your being was. And when you connect to that, even if you don't believe in any of this stuff, you still get to connect with that original self that was like, it connects you to that joy of being that you had before anyone specific was in your life, before anyone told you that you had to have a lover or be rich or whatever it was. It's like the you that was so happy to just exist and have a body and be a human being on earth at this time. That's the you that is going to light the way for your total and complete healing. And that's kind of like what we're striving for in these next levels of self. Okay, so I will talk to you really, really soon.